Okay. Thanks for coming. So today, assignment number one, that's probably what excites most of you. You know, how does the final assignment look like and what the next iteration will be. For this iteration, meaning until we find the next bug, the assignment has slightly refined it. Who has had a look at it since yesterday? Good, that's an indication. Okay, one person, great. Few changes. Number one, since the new database is really tough to query with respect to the extinction flag, we'll remove that requirement and simply substitute it by assuming that you simply are able to retrieve species by country, because that's much easier available in this API, and we're not running to risk of hitting the rate limit too fast, at least anyway. The only thing that is a modification there, apart from, of course, then the providing the country identifier to inquire species, is that you want to be able to give the user the option to limit or configure or parameterize the number of entries that they want to be returned, the number of species. You know that those APIs are basically, would in principle return you everything or with something within a certain limit, right? So I think there's a limit built in anyway. But you want to make this parameterizable from a user perspective, denoted as here. So basically that this is an optional parameter with a particular value, right? I hope you read this in this spirit. So there's no actual curly braces in the URL, but actually it just means it's an optional parameter to the URL. So you can parameterize the number of species to be returned. And that should be relatively straightforward to translate into the API you're going to be using. The rest is largely unchanged. So there were some issues about the correspondence between the species keys in different API endpoints, but since they are not explicitly linked, that won't be problematic anymore, because you will not need to use that API to query another API to figure out the extinction status of a species, because you're just listing it. But conversely, the modification in the context of the specific species is also a modification here. So recall you have multiple endpoints. One of them is country, one of them is species, and the species one will just ask you to inquire. Oh, so that was a question already.
Yeah. Question about the species key. Do we have to pass it as a string, or can we just store it as the int that we get it as? Because now you have in quotes as if you want it as a string.
I think it's safer using it as a string. I'm not sure if there's a leading zero in there somewhere.
Right.
If any of the species key. That's something I would need to, I don't know by heart right now. Is it returned as a string from
it's
the...
It's returned
as an int? Okay, then you probably get away with it. Yes, go for it. Yeah. We're indifferent as long as it works, really.
How you're just have it specifically in quotes in the specification.
Okay. I see what you mean.
That's the species key up on top.
That's right. This is kind of a safe way out, I guess. But you're right. So if you're sure it's an int?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can change it to an int. It's fine. That should work. Yeah, let's go. I'll change it in a second. But yeah, you can go for an int then, if that's sufficient. It's merely the leading zero that may or may not be relevant in some cases. Cool. So the only thing that we modified there, instead of indicating the extinction, you need to figure out the year of last documentation of the species. It's not super obvious to get it, but it's actually straightforward, because it's actually returned but embedded in a string, which is annoying. But if you actually inquire the endpoint species key / name, you get the raw year as well. So you need to do one more request to a different endpoint to retrieve the year. So that would be the year in which the species was, I think, first documented, I believe. So I'm a bit out of a limb here, but you will know best afterwards when you notice that some animals have been discovered in 1758 or something like this. Anyway, so it still has the same kind of complexity and kind of assembling with a lot fewer queries. That's the key idea there. So it would be good if you can play with this and see if you get into issues, but I think it should be very straightforward now, chaining the different requests. Sorry. Right, the last thing I got, there was a question about this diagnostic interface. Why do we do this stuff? Did we discuss it in class already? No? Anyone, any guesses as to why we do it? Or anyone who knows it can actually voice it already.
So that while in production you can see what has failed. Is it my problem or is it somewhere else?
Exactly, right? So it's really about, if you write web service or web applications, the challenge is you're linking so many different things together, right? So you may rely on 5 web services, right? So, or perhaps there may be a web service that relies on a different web service that relies on a web service again, right? And this kind of complexity, you may actually want to figure out sometimes, where the issue is, right? Here we only have 2 web services, surprise, so it's not terribly hard, but you still want to figure out, are they in principle available, right? And that's the only purpose of this diag interface, plus some documentation purposes. For example, hard coding, literally providing the versions. People know we're working on version 1. If we're in assignment 2 writing version 2 of this thing, right, it would be hard coded version 2, hypothetically. And so on, right? So, and the uptime would be the second since last service restart. There was previously server restart. I realize we can't always control that. For example, if some of you want to, don't have control about the server they're running. So in this sense, it makes more sense to keep track of the last time the service has restarted, because you can just keep, take a timestamp whenever your service is started. But if you, for example, host it on Heroku, you may not know when your dyno was down or not. Okay, so those are modifications. Yeah, so that should be a bit more coherent now.
No question.
Question.
The timestamp on Heroku, if you have do a timestamp in the start of the main function,
yeah,
you'll get it will reset when the dyno goes to sleep and goes up again.
Yeah.
So
it resets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So resets to 0, right? Yeah. That's why service restart, right? The last time you started the service, the dyno in Heroku speak, right? Yeah. But it could be, so we don't want to keep track of the hardware or virtual hardware, but just of your service, right? So that's the idea behind this. Cool. Any other questions regarding the refinements? Okay. Who has questions specific to the assignment? Please.
I'm struggling with decoding a list of species.
Yeah.
Or I don't know how to do that.
I'll cause the code example of decoding an array of like structs from an example on Golang's pages in the Discord.
Yeah. That would be good. Yeah. So the problem is, if we have too much decoding exactly your data structure, we're doing the entire work for you. So we need to ensure that you kind of play around with the experiment a bit. So it's really good if you post the example. But if you get stuck afterwards, we can follow up on this. So it's a very specific problem, of course. Sure. Other issues? In any case, we'll be around, and just you can raise hands and we come around. I'll stop streaming at this stage because you probably don't need to have your individual issues on the stream, and then we can attack this point, because there are some comments that people want to have some sort of more support. So that's the opportunity now, especially ones that have looked into the assignment. Are there people that haven't looked at all into the assignment yet? Okay, that's honest. Honesty is good.